What's going on, YouTube? Got another knife review here for you. This is of the Hinderer XM-18. This is the 3-inch slicer grind with a flipper, featuring the Coyote Brown Flat Dark Earth G10 presentation scale. And this one's got the sterile blade with Duratec 20 CV. So this is an older generation Hinderer. Definitely like the sterile blade much more than the newer ones with all the, Hinderer horse markings and blade steel markings on there. So anyway, a really quick breakdown of this knife. Spec wise, you got a 3-inch blade as well as an overall length of 7 inches. And then you've got an overall weight of 3.6 ounces. And then a 0.14 inch blade stock. And then the scales here are 0.125 inches. So basically the width or thickness of, Sebenza or Emerson blade. This is the overall size and thinness of this Hinderer. Here you got really quick size comparison against the Hinderer XM-18 3.5 inch. And then the XM-24 4-inch blade. And then I brought out these other knives. This is kind of the triumvirate of the knife world. Before you start breaking into customs and things like that, usually these are the three brands that people get into. Strider and Chris Reeve. This one is the TAD SMF CC Strider right here that I'm putting here on the bottom. And so, these three brands are pretty cool in that they have the same style blade offered in these different sizes. Even the Sebenza has the smaller Umfang blade that's discontinued right now. I have heard news that they're bringing it back, which would be kind of cool, interesting to see. And then on the Strider side, I haven't had the fortune of owning a PT, but that would be, the next smaller model down from the SMF to SNG and then to the PT. So I've heard good things about the PT. I've heard it's, relatively small as well. And that's, really that's going to be my first impression of the Hinderer 3-inch XM-18. So I'm going to leave the Chris Reeves out here right now. Looking at Hinderers, again, the shape of these knives are the exact same, save for, the different grinds on these knives. You got a Tom grind, custom grind on here. You got the Sponto on the XM-24, and then you got the slicer on here. Same thing with the Sebenza. You've got Insingo grind, and then you have the regular Sebenza 21 grind here. And let me start off, when I look at the Sebenza, large Sebenza, this is a very, capable blade, great build quality, typical Chris Reeve, fit and finish quality, all those things, perfectly centered, no issues with this blade whatsoever. And then when you get to the small Sebenza, it's just got a smaller frame, and maybe the slabs of titanium are a little bit thinner as well, just a tiny bit. But you have a blade stock that's the exact same as the large Sebenza at 0.125 inches. So both of these knives, so you don't feel like, with the small Sebenza, you don't feel like you're losing that much, when it comes to, again, the size comparisons. When you get into the SMF, definitely you have a much beefier looking and feeling folder, with the 185 or 0.19. I think it's 185 blade thickness on the SMF. And then when you get into the SNG, you know, the blade stock is still pretty thick, at least at 0.16 or so blade stock. So the SNG itself also feels very capable, and you know, definitely measures up to, you know, say the Hinderer 3.5 inch or the Sebenza right here. So again, I haven't had the fortune of owning a PT, so I can't say what that one feels like. But I'm kind of under the impression that it might leave me with the same impression that I got with the XM 3-inch blade. When I look at, you know, if you follow my channel, the XM24 was my very first Hinderer folder that I ever owned. And I was overwhelmed by this knife. I couldn't believe how thick it was, how stout it was, how solid this knife felt overall. You know, quality, fit and finish. You know, flipping action, very smooth. You know, to me, I felt like it really could justify even the secondary price. You know, definitely if you can get it at not market value, at Rick's, you know, value coming out of his shop. You know, these are amazing knives for those prices. Even at the secondary price, I feel like they're amazing knives. Then I got two XM, you know, 3.5-inch blades, and I was, again, just overwhelmed. I was really impressed by these knives, and everything about these knives just exudes the quality that you expect when you see that Hinderer, you know, on the frame of these knives, you know, right there. So when it came to getting the 3-inch XM-18, I guess my impressions, or I guess my overall anticipation, was that this was going to be a very beefy, very stout folder. And for the size of knife it is, I guess it is. You know, it's definitely a very capable, I wouldn't say beefy folder. It's definitely a stout folder. You know, no blade play whatsoever. Very solid knife. But just for me personally, I couldn't believe how small this knife was. You know, on camera, I think when people did reviews of it, it just never struck me as, you know, what a small knife it was. But when you have it in hand, even like actuating the lock, it just feels really loose. It takes no effort. It's almost too smooth. Not too smooth, too easy to disengage the lock. And then in hand, the handle, even though you can get a full 4-finger grip on there, it's just so thin. And again, I think when you use Hinderer, the name Hinderer, and knives in the same sentence, to me personally, I just feel like the first thing that you think of is, you know, overbuilt knife, expensive, overbuilt, you know, quality, fit and finish knife. And definitely quality, fit and finish is there, but I don't think for a moment I ever thought that this knife was overbuilt. In fact, I thought it was fragile, and especially, you know, because it carries the Hinderer name. I don't even think it's because of the slicer grind, because you don't really lose that much on the spine of the blade, you know, for a slicer grind. You just get a thinner grind over here, and it's a flat grind. This is a flat grind here. And so, yeah, I don't think you really lose too much in terms of strength of the blade. Definitely a Sponto tip is going to be a bit stronger than the slicer. But it was just the overall feel, overall thinness of this blade, of this knife, that to me kind of just left a lot to be desired. You know, if you compare the difference between the XM, the 3-inch model here, and the 3.5, you know, you just have such way thicker scales on this knife here. The blade thickness on the XM 3.5 is 0.165, so you know, it's 0.25, so it's a quarter inch, no, I'm sorry, not a quarter inch, 0.025 inches thicker, you know, than the 3-inch here. So I don't know if you can really tell. Hinderers are kind of hard to tell because the grind on top of the spine and especially since this is a regrind. Against a 24, definitely no comparison in terms of the thickness. But again, I don't know. I really don't know what it is. Given the, I got this one at around the secondary price, maybe a little bit lower in a trade, and again, pulling it out of the package, I was just so completely underwhelmed. And definitely there's a factor of having so many large folders, whether it's the 24, whether it was even the Sebenza is feels like it's much more substantial in hand than this knife. When I opened it up, when I actuated the lock, I was just surprised at how loose it felt. How, I don't want to say bad quality. It just didn't exude, or it didn't have that Hinderer feel, if you will. And I know that the 3-inch model, I mean, basically all it's meant to be is just a smaller version of the XM-24 and the XM-18 3.5 inch. But in my opinion, going down to the 3-inch, it doesn't feel like Hinderer at all. Going from a 24 to an 18 3.5 inch, you don't feel like it's that much smaller. It definitely still feels very substantial in hand, feels super comfortable in hand. But then going down to the 3-inch, all of a sudden it's like, dude, this thing is tiny, and it feels so insignificant in the hand. Going from the large Sebenza, and this is a little bit, I have the micarta handles on here, to the small Sebenza. To me, honestly, it doesn't feel like I'm losing that much, with these handles. Definitely from the SMF to the S&G, doesn't feel that small or that you're losing that much. But for this one, again, for whatever reason it is, I can't place it. It just feels so unsubstantial, in the hand. Going into some of my, philosophies, for small EDCs, I like carrying small EDCs every once in a while, and I like them to be capable, very capable blades. Like if I need to use them in an emergency, as a pry bar or whatever, that's why I typically like to have larger folders on me. But I'm not going to carry an XM, the 3-inch as a secondary, knife, as a little slicer. If I needed like a little tiny slicer, I'd carry, this little Seamus Arthur that I'll review a little bit later. This is an awesome secondary blade that you can just pop into your watch pocket or coin pocket on your jeans. But like I want to carry this knife as a primary carry, and I guess again my impressions is that it's Hinderer, it's going to be a very stout, very beefy folder, and it just isn't. It is what it is, I guess. If I were to reach for a smaller knife, just as a unobtrusive slicing folder, I would take the Sebenza, all the time, versus the Hinderer, because I think part of it also has to do with price. At the secondary price, you're talking anywhere between $600 to $700, for this tiny little knife versus a small Sebenza, which can be had for sub, $300. And then, now that I've fixed up my Benchmade NPR, this I feel like is a much more capable blade than the Hinderer 3-inch. You got a way thicker blade stock. You've got M390 blade steel, which is the same as 20 CV. And then you've got a much thicker frame lock, a very thick piece of G10, which is probably going to be as strong as this liner and G10, very thin G10 onto Hinderer. And again, just when you compare these blades next to each other, I mean there's no comparison. That's a huge stock of M390 on this Benchmade NPR. Even hard to use folder like the Three Sisters Forge Beast, I think in comparison, I think the Hinderer, looks way better in terms of, the Hinderer is a gorgeous knife, but as a hard use folder, I would grab the Beast over the Hinderer every time, So I don't know what it is. I feel like the Hinderer 3-inch kind of just falls in the middle of all these different knives. Obviously, you could use any one of these knives for pretty much every single everyday carry needs that you have, but this one kind of just falls in the middle of the pack of all those things. I don't think it does any one of those things particularly well compared to the rest of these knives. So yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. Some of you guys might, blast me for thinking this way on the 3-inch. For me, it really just didn't do it for me. And so, Hinderer XM-24, Hinderer, 3.5-inch, the Sabenzas, I feel like in their category, they all excel great, as in their particular categories. This one as a small EDC folder, basically what I think this is, if I were to sum it up, it's just a small EDC folder in the Hinderer line, but it doesn't strike you as like Hinderer hard use, I guess is the best way I can put it. And so for me, again, it kind of just left me underwhelmed. So anyway, yeah, let me know what you guys think. I'd really be interested on your take. I've seen a couple of reviews out there on the 3-inch, but yeah, let me know what you guys think on the comments down below. I'm really torn because it's hard for me to tear on Hinderer, but for this one, in particular, it just doesn't do it for me. Looks awesome, and I'm looking at it on the camera screen. I think it looks awesome, but yeah, it's just one that I wouldn't go out and grab in my daily carry. So, all right, guys, thanks for watching. Again, leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think. I'll see you guys on the next vid. Bye.